Timing is important on every shot, but for the single-hander, it's everything. If you don't meet the ball out in front with your arm extended, firstly, it's going to massively increase your chances of getting injured, but also it's going to make it extremely hard to generate power and to get topspin. So what I want to do in this video is break down the biomechanics of the single-handed backhand, talk about where the power comes from, and talk about some of the adjustments and things that you can work on to improve your timing. I hope you find this video helpful. If you do, it'd be awesome if you could give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to my channel and get the notifications turned on. Okay, so let's start by looking at the contact point, why it's so important. Then we'll talk about optimized biomechanics for generating power and spin. We'll talk about some of the things that you can work on to improve your timing, and then we'll kind of work backwards and look at adjustments that you can use if you really struggle to get your timing working, even if you incorporate some of the suggestions that I'm talking about. So contact point first. We want to contact it way out in front of our body. The reason that we want to contact it here is because the single-hander is a little bit different to some of the other shots. You actually use slightly smaller muscles in order to generate the speed. Now, yes, we're going to be using the legs, so I'm going to talk about that a lot in a moment. We're going to be using the lats, which are a really big muscle. But then we're using the smaller muscle on the back of the shoulder and maybe some of the external rotators as well. So relatively small, weak muscles compared to some of the muscles that we're going to be using on the forehand, where we've got the legs, we've got the lats, we've got the big strong chest muscle, we've got the muscles at the front of the shoulder. And obviously if you're hitting a two-hander, you've got the legs, you've got everything on both arms, so you've got a lot more muscle mass involved in generating this power and force. So for the single-hander, timing is going to be way more critical because we've got to rely on generating racket head speed. Because we've got smaller muscles, we need a little bit more space in order to be able to create that speed. So let's look at optimized biomechanics. If you watch the best players in the world with the best one-handed backhands, they all do it in a very similar way. There is a unit turn which brings the racket high, it turns the hips, it turns the shoulders. Normally the shoulders go further than the hips to create a bit of stretch and a bit of coil in the body that we can then use the elastic forces to generate a bit of speed. Often you're going to rotate so that your opponent would actually be able to see some of your shirt as you rotate onto the shot. So we've got this unit turn where we're rotating the body further than the legs. We're taking the racket back high, and obviously the legs are going to be in a different position depending on what type of shot. But the start position is there. Some people have a bent arm like Federer. Some people have more of a straight arm like Shapovalov. Some people have a little stretch in the shoulder. Some people have a bigger stretch. I personally find I do much better if I have a lot of pre-stretch in the shoulder with a straight arm, but that's a personal thing. There's some variation of this. Then from there is a racket drop. Now the racket drop doesn't just drop, it is actively taken down by the backhand. It generally drops into a position where the strings are actually facing towards the back fence, which gives us a lot of room, a lot of length in order to generate racket head speed. But it drops towards the back fence. From there, there's going to be a hip movement. So racket head speed generally starts, and racket head movement forwards generally starts from the feet. So I'm going to push into the ground with my back leg. My back hip is going to come round, and if I don't do anything with my arms, there's going to be this kind of motion. So I've dropped down, and then I've got this movement starting my arm movement, and from there I continue it in a pulling motion, and I end up in this kind of racket lag position, similar, if you want to think about it, to how you would end up in a forehand. But here I've got this backhand position. The chest is going to stay a little bit more still, and the racket comes around. Now it's my shoulder that's doing this movement, hitting through the ball. I've got forwards movement coming from all this momentum, and I've got a bit of external rotation in the shoulder, which is going to create the topspin. And they're the biomechanics. We've got the stretch in the upper body. We've got the height, we've got the momentum, we've got a leg drive to start the forwards movement of the swing, we've got a pulling motion, and then we've got the arm action that continues into the ball. So that's a lot of stuff going on, and you can see why we need to meet the ball out in front, because if we don't start the swing soon enough for that to happen, we're going to end up in there. There's no movement, or sorry, there's no room to allow this swing to occur. You have to bend your wrist, you have to do something to compensate. It increases the chances of injury because there's a lot of forces going into the wrist, and you just aren't able to generate the power and the spin. That's why timing is so important. You've got to start the swing at precisely the right time in order to allow all this to happen. So let's look at some of the things that you can do to really start to improve your timing. What can you work on? The first thing is the preparation. This one should go without saying. If you don't prepare quick enough, it's going to be really hard to start the swing early enough and to time the ball well. So in terms of preparation, we've just looked at it. We've got to get this unit turn. Practice it over and over again. You've obviously got to see the ball, you've got to be able to react to the ball. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but as soon as you notice that it's coming to your backhand, you've got to be doing that unit turn. Now, it's okay to spend time in this position, so you just want to practice the unit turn. You want to practice it stepping out into the unit turn. You want to practice it stepping forwards. You want to practice stepping in different positions, but just getting this unit turn, getting your shoulder prepared in whatever position is right for you. You also want to work on moving around in that position. So can I sidestep? Can I do crossovers? Can I bounce? Can I move forwards? Can I move back? Just be very comfortable and familiar with being in your kind of set position, so that then, depending on what movement you need to the ball, then you can start the rest of it. So the first thing, practice that preparation to death. Make sure you can get it as early as possible. From there, thinking about just being on your toes a little bit more and making sure you don't get stuck is going to be a really important piece for timing. Now, I'm learning to play again left-handed, and this is one of the places that I was really getting stuck. I was doing a lot of things right, but I was so focused on what I was doing with my arms. I was very stiff, which we'll get to in a moment, but then I was kind of getting stuck. So I was thinking about when to swing with my arms, and I wasn't in the right place with my feet. Remember this forwards movement, forehand, everything starts from the ground up. So making sure that you're nice and light on your toes, not on your heels, pushing through that back toe can really help to start the swing at the right moment and make sure that you've got optimal timing. So like I've just said, relaxation is going to be key. If you're tight, sometimes that causes you to tense up and hit a little bit late, so it can be very tricky to do, but you want to try and stay nice and relaxed as you're hitting these shots. And then the next thing that we're really going to be thinking about is maybe breaking some of the habits. So again, I'll talk about vision more in a moment, but a lot of the time people have just habituated incorrect timing patterns. So you have to find some way to break that bad habit, and often thinking about the legs is the way to go. People get so heavily focused, and again, this is a problem that I've had many times, on what the upper body's doing. If you think about the feet, so you might have to practice this for different styles of ball. So you might have to practice on a low ball, you might have to practice on more of a floaty ball, a bit of a moon ball with different types of spin. But think about when you need to start your swing. Be prepared to start your swing early, make a few mistakes in the wrong direction in order to break your habits, but potentially thinking about the timing. So if you know that you hit the ball late whenever it's a heavy topspin ball, try and become aware of when you start your swing and what you think about when you're starting your swing. And then maybe start to think, okay, what I need to do, I need to start my leg drive as the ball bounces, or start my leg drive just before the ball bounces. Now, the type of ball that you're receiving is going to really change all that. So this might be something, like I said, that you need to practice with different types of shot, but think about different types of cue that you can use. If you're always thinking about swinging with your arm, maybe think about, okay, when should I start the racket drop? When should I start pushing with the back leg? And hopefully that might help you to break the habit and improve your timing. Now, beyond that, then we're looking at different ways to modify the stroke. So what we've talked about so far are optimized biomechanics. This is the way the best players on the planet do it. If you can do it that way, that's awesome. It's going to allow you to have the best quality stroke. But sometimes that isn't possible. And I made a video a couple of weeks ago talking about this. Why do I keep hitting the ball late? Definitely check out that video, and you want to get the program that comes along with it, because sometimes there's stuff going on in your body that makes timing way more challenging. Now, if that's the case, You don't have to try and keep hitting it like the pros do and keep making the same mistakes. If, as things stand, you aren't able to do all this stuff and meet the ball out in front, it is okay not to try and hit the ball like the pros. You can simplify your stroke. So instead of starting up there, you can start down there. One of the guys that plays where I play, I think he was a former like 400 or 500 in the world ITF, really good player, much better player than me, much better backhand than me, and he starts down there. And he got to a really high level. Obviously, he's not one of the top players in the world now, but compared to most people, fantastic player. And he just turns into that position and he still hits a good shot. Because remember, what we want, if we can use our hips, we always want to be using our hips in the shot, using a full body movement. We can do that from here. So if you can't time this and this, just get it down to there and start the movement that way. And obviously the next thing along from that would just be starting in this position. If you find that you can't time it going from there to there, then just start in this position. Use your hip to start the movement and hit through the ball. You can still hit a really good quality backhand. You can still get a decent bit of power. You might not be able to get quite as much spin. You can place the ball. You can have a good quality backhand just by starting there, using the hips and then hitting through the ball. And then I guess the next thing back from that in terms of modifications would be adjusting the grip. We haven't talked about the grip, but the more extreme your grip is, the more further around this way, or if I'm a right-hander, further around this way, the further out in front your contact is going to be. So if you're really struggling to meet the ball out in front, even after making all these adjustments and trying all these things, potentially you could just try easing your grip around a little bit. So now instead of having to contact it out here, I can still contact it back there and hit a decent quality of backhand. So a few different things you can work on. We've got the optimized biomechanics. You've got to make sure that you're prepared. You've got to stay nice and light on your toes. You've got to think about ways to break the habits, because sometimes that's all you need to do. And then if you really can't make things work, start to dial things back and find what works for you. You really don't want to get trapped into this, always trying to have to hit this perfect stroke, because there is no perfect way to hit the ball. It's about doing what works for you. The thing that's important is the angle of the racket face relative to the swing speed and the swing path at the moment you contact the ball. That's what dictates where the ball goes. We've got optimized biomechanics on one end of the spectrum, but you've got to remember that the people you see on TV are crazy, freaky tennis athletes. And then we've got kind of a more classical style with a less extreme grip, less complexity on the other end of the spectrum. There's no right or wrong, it's doing what works for you. Now, obviously what I would recommend, in addition to finding what works for you right now, is to work on your body, to find the things that are going on in your body that are preventing you from having good timing. So maybe you struggle with flexibility. So maybe you can't optimize your biomechanics because you don't have a flexible enough spine, in which case that might be something you need to work on. But when it comes to the timing, potentially you might struggle with the timing because your visual system isn't capable of judging distance and depth. And this is a really, really common problem that I find with tennis players. If you can't judge distance accurately, it is going to be impossible to time the ball well on a consistent basis. So in addition to kind of modifying your stroke, I highly recommend that you look at working on that side of things. And to help you out with that, I've created a free Tennis Vision starter program. There's a link in the description. There's also a card floating around somewhere that if you click on that, it's going to allow you to download this free program. So I highly advise you check that out and start working on it while you're making these adjustments. Now, the other option that you've got for getting help with this is I help players with brain-based training. There's the vision, there's movement, there's coordination, there's a lot of stuff that goes into be able to playing tennis at a high level. If your goal is really to be the best player that you can be, in addition to working on the technical side of things and the tactical side of things, you should be working on improving the way that your body functions. We can work on fitness, we can work on speed, we can work on strength, but often those aren't the things that hold players back. Often it's the skill component and the hand-to-eye coordination component. And the good news is there are things that you can do to train that, and that's one of the big areas that I help tennis players in. So if that's something that's interesting to you, again, there's another link that's down in that description. schedule a free chat with me. I'll learn more about you and see if there's some way that I can help, okay? I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, be awesome if you could give me a thumbs up. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below and I will try and get back to you as quick as I can.